Gümrük Politikası Birim Başkanı Sayın Michèle Perolat olacak. For our third session on EU Customs Reform and Integration, söyleyemedim, kusuruma bakmayın, of Product Safety, we are pleased to welcome our distinguished online speaker, Ms. Michèle Perolat, Deputy Director for Customs and Head of Unit of Customs Policy and European Commission, DG TAXUD. Thank you for joining us online. Sorry, Ms. Perolat, I can't hear you. Please, your microphone is open. Your microphone, Ms. Perolat. Yes.
Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Can you hear you, but your friend's microphone is closed or open?
It is closed.
Near gentleman, or can you try? Can you try again?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I can hear you.
I think it works. So it's my pleasure with you, unfortunately, person, because I could not to Ankara, but to show you a number of slides where I would like to share with you major elements of new customs reform finalized at you. If I move slide, one shows in one snapshot the main element of reform, which is more than a simplification. It's really a revolution we have undertaken in the Constitution since its creation in 19. And this reform is strengthening customs and simplifying customs processes for the traders who are reliable and who could indeed benefit from such simplification. If I move to the next slide, this process took its roots quite some years ago, is when she was appointed as President of the EU, Mrs. van der Leyen, that she would propose a package for an integrated European approach to reinforce risk management and support effective controls by member states, and that it was time to take the European Union to the next level. So we have undertaken a number of steps to arrive to out with an exercise for a foresight, trying to imagine what the be in 20 and designing scenarios. We then convened a wide who made a series of recommendations, and from that I took it up as from 2020 to prepare the reform package, which is on the table, fully negotiated, but I'm going to present to you right now through where we are going to start together. So let's move on with the slide. And the next slide explains to you why we have undertaken the reform that we have put on the table. The EU is squeezed in terms of customs activities. So we have squeezed customs between, on the one hand, growing costs, especially coming from non-fiscal regulation and directives. We have now today a number of more than 307 regulations that customs, being the first line of defense, have to verify at the border when goods are coming in or when they are exiting the EU. It is, of course, a burden that customs authorities have more and more difficulty to take over when just a few number it was possible. Today it's really a task that is quite burdensome, and the pipeline is continuing to grow because we have still a number of regulation that will come in the next years, months and years, and the problem will not diminish. On the other hand, we are confronted to a dramatic increase of e-commerce activities and of small parcels. It started especially after the COVID crisis, but since then we've seen the number of small parcels being tripled compared to what it was in 2022. Today we arrive at almost 6 billion parcels per year, and this phenomenon is going to continue to grow. Of course, it makes it very difficult for customs authorities to verify and control these small parcels, including using, of course, risk management and risk analysis. And therefore, these two phenomena led to have a customs reform which is fully fledged and which is really a complete evolution compared to what we have today. If we move to the next slide, this is an overview of the full customs reform. On the right-hand side, on the left-hand side of the slide, you see that the objective of the customs reform is to make the best use of the information that is coming from economic operators. And economic operators in the reform, it means information coming from the importer or exporter who is located on the EU territory, and who endorses the full responsibility and liability for fiscal and non-fiscal risks, which is really a norm. And this information will in fact also comprise information coming from the manufacturer, the wholesaler, the forwarder, the carrier, and all this information will be made available to a customs data hub that will replace in the very near future the existing IT systems that we have now in the EU, but that function in silos. And this EU Customs Data Hub will be built by an EU Customs Authority, which is a decentralized agency that will be created very soon now. It is now embedded into the agreement that was reached at EU level at the end of March. And this EU Customs Authority will have as a primary task to build the data hub and to do EU risk analysis at EU level, which at this moment does not exist fully, only to a very limited scale at Commission level. In the very near future, it will exist for all types of business models, starting with e-commerce, and will allow to have a complete overview of the supply chain, whether goods enter in Rotterdam or whether they enter in Athens. Everything will be screened and will be known in advance, and will allow to have an anticipated view and to do risk management even before goods enter into the EU territory or exit the EU territory, because we have also the same principles applicable at export. It doesn't mean that this EU Customs Authority will have boots on the ground. It will be an operational layer between, on the one hand, the Commission keeping its role of initiator of the laws, of being responsible of the implementation of EU law, and the EU Customs Authorities. EU Customs Authorities will keep their roles as of today, where they will grant authorizations, they will collect customs duties and VAT at import, they will make national decisions to control or not to control, and they will also continue to do risk analysis at national level. This is quite important because the more risk analysis we have and the better the EU data hub will be equipped. All the controls, results of controls and national risk analysis will have to be embedded to the EU Customs Data Hub. The more data the Customs Data Hub will have, and the more powerful it will be for indicating whether a trader or whether a supply chain is at risk and before goods arrive in the EU or exit the EU. So this is again the objective of having an anticipative role instead of having a reactive role, as usually is the case today, despite very good tools that we have, but which are not enough to comply this role. And on the right-hand side, because the code that we have proposed and negotiated is extremely complete, we have also set up a framework of cooperation between the EU Customs Authority that will exist as from tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, it means the end of the year, and other authorities. These other authorities, they are law enforcement bodies. We have Europol, Frontex, we have many law enforcement authorities with whom we need to have a good cooperation if we want to fight against fraud or prevent fraud. And it is also market surveillance authorities. We have a very wide constellation of market surveillance authorities today in the EU. We have many authorities in the member states. Despite we have 27 customs authorities, we have much more in terms of market surveillance authorities, and it makes it quite difficult sometimes to cooperate with them. So the objective is that the EUCA, the EU Customs Authority, will have the possibility to establish a structured framework of cooperation to make the best of the knowledge of the market surveillance authorities and for them to have a better knowledge also of risk management, which is performed by customs authorities and tomorrow by the EUCA. In addition, we have also in the code, and I will have a possibility to speak about that in a few moments. We have also inserted some provisions on international cooperation. We have now provisions for facilitating exchange of information with third countries, and I'm sure you will be interested with this type of provision. So this is really the snapshot of this customs reform. An importer-exporter who is fully liable for the import or export located on the EU territory of the EU territory, because we want to have the possibility to control that person, that company. In case the importer-exporter is not established in the EU territory, he or she will have to designate a direct representative established on the EU territory that will take full responsibility. But the objective is really to have a much better grasp on someone who is liable at one moment for the good. And it's also the creation of a new status. I will have also the possibility to come to it later, which is the trust and check status that builds on the AEO status, the authorized economic operator, and who will be granted maximum of benefits in exchange of the maximum of transparency over its supply chain. It allows me to go to the next slide, which is another configuration, another presentation of the reform pillars: simplifications for reliable traders, trust and check, AEOs who will benefit from simplifications. Trust and check will benefit from the major simplifications in exchange of transparency, and that will make the customs union much stronger because it will allow it to do risk analysis at the EU level. We have also a made e-commerce regime. I will have the possibility to come to it later. Risk management at EU level, and all that lies on one major key enabler, which is the EU Customs Authority, that does not exist, although we have a customs union since 1968. And that EU Customs Authority will build the essential enabler, which is the EU Customs Data Hub, destined to entirely replace the existing IT systems that are now operating at EU level. Let's move to the next slide. This is the timeline of the legislative process. We have tabled the proposal in May 2023. We had, we have two co-legislators in the EU, the Council of Ministers on the one hand, and the European Parliament on the other hand, and both co-legislators have to issue an opinion. The Parliament issued its first reading opinion already in April 2024, before the recess of the Parliament, and then the Council started the negotiation under the Spanish presidency in July 2023, and ended up its compromise text in June 2025. So in June 2025, we had a compromise text from the Council which allowed to enter into the mechanism of what we call the trilogue, meaning that Parliament, Council, and Commission sit together and try to reach an agreement on the text. So, of course, the Parliament has its own mandate for negotiating, and the Commission is there first to defend its initial proposal, but also to help the co-legislators to find a compromise. And such a compromise has been reached, politically speaking, in the final political trilogue that took place on the 26th of March 2026. After that, both the Council and the Parliament confirmed this political agreement at the level of ambassadors for the Council, at the level of the Commission for the Parliament. And now the text is gone for revision by jurist-linguists and will go very soon into translations. And when it will be translated, there will be a formal adoption at Council and Parliament at the higher level of these two co-legislators levels, meaning the Council of Ministers, and meaning also the plenary session from the European Parliament. As soon as it is agreed, it will go for publication. We expect the publication to arrive end of September, beginning of October, and one day after publication, the text will enter into force. And more than that, it will enter into application immediately for certain provisions, and especially the provisions creating the EUCA, the EU Customs Authority. So we can start operating with the EUCA, we can start building the EUCA, the Commission will start with this exercise. The provision for the EU Customs Data Hub will also immediately enter into application. So it will allow money and to start building the EU Customs Data Hub. As the EUCA will not yet be there, the Commission will start the work, because the urgency for the EU is to have a data hub fully operational on the 1st of July 2028 for e-commerce purposes. Therefore, provisions on e-commerce will also be applicable as from the day after publication, because they will need to be in operation already at the moment when it can be scrutinized, and the major provision of e-commerce will be there. The rest of the provisions will enter into application 12 months after publication, meaning if we have, for example, the publication of the 1st of October this year, the rest of the provisions will be applicable on the 1st of October 2027. So you see that this reform is really for almost right now, it's for tomorrow. So that's why it's quite important to keep in mind the principles that are underneath this reform. Let's continue. And I will start with the EU Customs Authority, which is the key enabler, and without which there will be no data hub for the other business models than the e-commerce. It is what we call a decentralized agency. We have 35 decentralized agencies today in the EU. It would be the 36th, so a decentralized agency. It would be located in Lille. We had quite a number of applications for the seat, but finally, end of March, it was decided that it would be Lille in France. Its main tasks, as I said, will be the construction and operation of the data hub, so that the EUCA will be able to do risk management at EU level. But more than that, this agency authority will also be the crisis management cell in case we are confronted to further crisis in the EU. We have the COVID, we have Brexit, we have now the war with Ukraine. I think it stopped now. Unfortunately, my presentation has disappeared, so we will try to put it again on the screen. I will stop for a while so that it can be displayed again. We have difficulties of connection, I must say, with so maybe I can continue just for a few elements so that we do not lose too much time while my colleagues are trying to put the presentation again on the screen. As I said, this authority will be the crisis management cell for the future crisis, and it will, at this occasion, design protocols and procedures for every type of crisis that could occur in the future. And when a crisis is designated at political level, then the EUCA will be in charge of verifying that the protocol and procedure which is applicable is really applied by the member states, and will of course report back to the Commission on the results of the implementation. The authority will also have as a task to organize a joint coordination, to facilitate cooperation between the member states. For example, it will be a sort of virtual academy for training, meaning that the EUCA will define the content of the basic training that should be displayed by all member states. It will not replace the existing channels of training that are in use in the member state. For example, in France, there is a customs school, the same in Germany. In other member states, you have university degrees which are possible to get. This will not be changed, but at least we would like the content of the training to be. We still have difficulties to put the presentation back. We would like the content of the training to be harmonized, because it's quite important that officials are trained in the same way, have the same basic information and knowledge of the content of customs law. And the same applies to professionals from economic operators. The Parliament was very adamant to have professionals also benefiting from this common training. Another example I could give is the fact that the authority will organize customs offices, blueprints and verifications, just to assess that local offices or customs offices are well set up, that they are sufficiently staffed, that they have the sufficient equipment, and could then make recommendations in case it is not the case. It seems that we have yeah, okay. The staff of the agency, the 200 5 people. It's plus 35 compared to our proposal, and the reason is that the co-legislators have increased the number of tasks to be devoted to the authority. For example, we have created the advisory board, which will allow economic operators to be in contact with the EUCA and to discuss operational issues. They've created the data auditor who would verify the accesses to the data hub. The data hub would be a wealth of data, of sometimes sensitive data, and therefore we need to verify, we will need to assess and to verify that those who have access to the data hub are really authorized to do so. So the EUCA, in a nutshell, will be a member state-driven authority. It will be composed, the management board will be composed of the 27 member states, but the Commission will keep a role in the governance. So the Commission will keep a role in the management board because it will be part of the management board, and it will be either the chair or the co-chair of the management board. It will keep a role in the working program that the EUCA will establish every year. So we managed to preserve the Commission role because the Commission will have to monitor how the EUCA functions, as the Commission will keep a certain responsibility, nevertheless, in the way it will function. So we can move to the next slide. And the next slide is about, we have a better view there on the top. We have already spoken about that, so I can move on again. I think we can move on to the next one, which is the data hub. So the data hub is a concept which has nothing to do with an IT system, with a classical IT system. Today, on the left-hand side, you see the current situation. You see the 27 member states. We have in the center the UCC, the Union Customs Code, and the Commission, which has no access to the data. We have no central access to the data today. We have only a very fragmented view through a system which is called Surveillance 3, but it is a view which does not allow to have a very dedicated knowledge of what's happening at EU level. We have consolidated data, but it doesn't go beyond this. And of course, it does not allow to, as I said at the beginning, to do risk management at EU level. We've calculated, as you can see on the slide, that we have 111 separate IT systems, which each time require that we have a legal base. The Commission established specifications at functional and technical level. It costs money. Then the member states do the same, they contract. It costs money. And finally, economic operators, when it comes to trans-European systems, and for example in CPS, they have also to invest so that the format of the data is compatible and compliant with the customs declaration, the certificates, and so on and so forth. Each time there is a modification, it implies that there is a log, and it takes 1 to 2 years to integrate such modifications into the IT systems. Of course, it is not sustainable in the 21st century. The reform will get rid of it, and instead will replace the IT system by a central data hub. It's a hub where the data will not necessarily be stored, but they will be accessible from the hub. Some of them will be stored, they will be stored in the cloud, but they can be accessed by the EUCA and all the customs authorities at any moment in the data hub. And it means also that for the economic operators, it will represent a significant simplification. Today, an economic operator operating through 3 member states has to open an account in the 3 member states. Tomorrow, with the data hub, a single account will be valid throughout the entire EU. And when the information concerns exactly the same type of goods, it will be entered only once. So a significant simplification for the economic operators, especially small and medium enterprises. A single account similar to have with your tax returns, where you usually have in all countries a single tax account. You enter your data, cannot be repudiated. They can be modified until the moment you click on the button and you accept. But the data are valid, but then you cannot modify them anymore. So this is this type of philosophy that will be behind, and all the data. So very simple economic operator, very complex behind, because of course behind we will have a huge number of micro applications that will take a few months to construct and very few time to correct, contrary to an IT system which today takes 6 years on average to be constructed. So all that completely changes the logic and the paradigm on which we are operating. Because we cannot afford anymore to spend 6 years on an IT system which works in silo and does not necessarily speak with the other systems. We need to have a full interconnection. Of course, all this will function only with automaticity, and automaticity today means in artificial intelligence. Tomorrow, we don't know what will be on our plate. Today, it's artificial intelligence, and we expect that we will have a lot of automatization of the risk management, which does not mean that human beings will be discarded. It's all the contrary, and this is why the EOCA will recruit a significant number of data scientists and data analysts. Because in the end, even if you have the best IA of the world, of course, the final decision needs to be made by a human being. So this is in a nutshell what is in the Data Hub. I can continue with the next slide, which will show you the underlying principles that I have more or less already described. A single trader account and identity, which will facilitate the entry into the Data Hub environment for a trader. A lot of cybersecurity and data security. We have very strong provisions on that in the text, with very strict accesses to the Data Hub, because again, the Data Hub will be the engine of the reform. It's a wealth of data, of sensitive commercial and personal data, so we cannot afford to have leakage, to have attempts of breaking the rules for accessing the data, and the rules will be extremely difficult to circumvent. So it is really at the center of our construction today. We will have consolidated interfaces, again, one gateway for trade, customs, and other authorities, which will eliminate multiple and fragmented entry points. Integrated functions, we don't function anymore in silos, and it will allow a holistic view across customs, taxation, safety, and compliance. It allows me to come now to a major element of what I will describe later on, which is the end of the customs declaration. At one point in time, when everybody will be in the Data Hub, customs declaration will completely disappear. And this will be replaced by events. So when goods arrive on the territory, it is an event. It is recorded into the Data Hub. When goods are put into free circulation, it is an event. There is a date. It has a legal certainty, and it is recorded in the Data Hub, and so on and so forth. Each time the importer or exporter will put an information into the Data Hub, it will be an event. So we will define all that, of course, in the secondary legislation, but it will be an event-based supervision. Centralization, as I said, and integrated data that will allow to have good risk management. We can move on. So this is another image of the EU data hub. It's like a lake where you have all that I have described, but presented in another way. We can move on as well. It's not a big bang, because the e-commerce data hub will be first constructed and up and running on the 1st of July 2028. My colleagues in the digital directorate are working on it. The authority does not exist yet, but we have to start now, so that's why the Commission is starting the work. And it will allow to have already all the applications which are necessary for following up the e-commerce to be there. 2031 is a fundamental date, because in 2031 we expect 95% of the economic operators to be in the hub. All the trust and check traders will be in the hub, but we expect many, many others to be there as well. And we will just keep the existing IT systems alive until 2034, just the time to onboard the remaining economic operators until 2034. On the 1st of March, the existing IT systems will cease to exist, because on that hub, but again, I insist, we expect a very vast majority of them to be there. So it means that all the legislation has to be prepared, the legislation has to be prepared and ready 2029. 2029 is the target date for having everything in place in terms of legislation, in terms of technicalities, in terms of operational aspects of the EU Customs Authority. We are in 2026. It's very ambitious, but we are in front of emergencies, and we cannot wait any longer. Compared to our initial proposal, it's much more ambitious, and it is the willingness of the co-legislators, but also of the Commission. So we are completely aligned with what the co-legislators wanted to have. Let's move on. I'm going very quickly to risk management. I already spoke about it, so I have only one slide on it, but and I think we can move on. The only thing I would like to say is that the EUCA, based on the risk management it will do, will provide some recommendations of control to customs authorities, not orders, recommendations. And the customs authority can comply, or if it does not comply, it will have to explain. And the explanation in itself is an information. It's a data. This data will have to be put into the data hub, because it's an information that will enrich the risk management analysis. It's a feedback loop, and you know that risk management works in feedback loops. So in a nutshell, we expect protection of consumers and the market. We can move. And I'm going to enter into customs processes, because of course there we have also major modifications, much more modifications with a revolution. Today we have a multiplicity of actors, and each actor has part of the information and has not a complete overview of the information, cannot master the information. Usually a declaration is lodged by a declarant who has information from second or third hand, is completed by the carrier, and is submitted to the National Customs Authority, which will examine the declaration. So it's a consignment-based approach, and the Customs Authority will accept, check the declaration, and on a case-by-case will control. So it's really consignment-based approach. Tomorrow, the customs reform, so in 1 year, basically, especially for e-commerce, there will be the end of the customs declaration, replaced by the event-based approach, as I explained, in the data hub constructed by the EUCA. What does it mean? It means it is the importer who is the primary person, who is the person for which finally we have a definition in the code. And the importer is the person who decides to initiate the fact that the goods will arrive on the territory of the EU. He initiates the fact that goods are going to enter into the EU. The exporter the same. So the importer will provide about the fact that it has a contract in a third country. For example, washing machines at a certain moment. So he endorses the responsibility of the operation. This information stemming from the contract, focusing on the good, on the supplier, on the classification, the origin, and so on, will be completed by the carrier. We will have information on the vessel. We will have information on the port of arrival, and so on. So both will insert this information into the data hub, and the EUCA will have direct access to this information, as well as the customs authorities which are concerned with the movement. So let's suppose that the importer is located in France, but he decides to import through Rotterdam for a good which is to be delivered in Italy. At least these three customs authorities will have an access to this information. So the carrier will put it through information, and the EUCA will have the possibility to have a scaled impact of controls. You see that it allows to have real supervision strategies and cooperation, because washing machine, if I take my example, it implies a number of legislation to be verified. If, for example, these washing machines are coming from Korea, it also implies to have a look at the possible agreement that we have with this country. And it allows finally to anticipate whether this import presents a risk or does not present a risk. If it presents a risk, the EUCA, before the goods arrive in Rotterdam, they are supposed to arrive in September 26, although I announced I will import them already. I announced in June 26 that I will import them. It allows the EUCA to maybe recommend to have a do not load, do not transport, which is for also shippers and carriers easier to do than to have goods arriving in the port of Rotterdam and finally being declared as not compatible, non-compliant with the legislations that customs authorities have to apply. So this is a major step forward in the landscape. We can move on. I would like to stop a little bit on the trust and check status. We will have in the future, we will keep the AO status, although I must say the Commission wanted to get rid of the AO. We considered that the AO was not satisfactory. We would have kept only the AO for security because we have MRAs with third countries, but we wanted to get rid of the AO status. The co-legislators decided otherwise, so we keep the AO for simplification, but we have on top of it the trust and check status. The trust and check will benefit from a wider range of simplification. The principle of the trust and check is that by default, the operator will benefit from the centralized clearance approach. It's a by default approach, although for the NAO today, it is a request for an authorization. It will have the possibility to do self-controls. It will have the possibility to do self-release. It will have the possibility to do periodic payments of customs duties. And on top of it, it will have the possibility of not putting the goods under transit between the point of entry into the EU territory and the point of delivery of the goods, of destination of the goods, meaning that there is no guarantee and the goods will only be under customs supervision, even if, in my example, I am in France, my goods arrive in Rotterdam and they are delivered in Poland. The goods between Rotterdam and Warsaw will be transported without a transit, without transit and without transit guarantee. So this is in exchange of having real-time data access in a push or pull mode, depending also on the level of development of the economic operator. Let's suppose I'm a very big company. It can be a system to data hub connection, or it can be something else. It can be just an XML message. It can be, if I'm a small and medium enterprise, it can be just an interface that will be constructed. And in the format it is, compared to what is the case today, the format is not important in the future. What will be important will be to define which element, which information the customs authority and the EOCA will have the right to ask or to access into the system of the economic operator in real time, meaning that when it is available, and this will also be left to the choice of the economic operator. So let's move on to the next slide. And this slide shows you the differences between the AOF, so AOF being simplification plus security, and the trust and check trader. You see that in yellow, what is really the difference is in self-release, self-control, no transit formalities, and the fact that by default, it will be the member state establishment of the trust and check trader that will be responsible for authorizing, for giving the single authorization of trust and check, and for controlling the trust and check trader. So let's move on. E-commerce. E-commerce is at the center, and as I said, an urgency for the EU. When we tabled the proposal, we had a rather soft approach to e-commerce, but in between, we were confronted to a flood of small parcels. And we had, during the negotiation, the co-legislators had to react to this situation, and they have designed themselves the approach to e-commerce, which is quite different from the one that we had tabled in 2022. As you see, the volumes are absolutely incredible. We have a 320% increase in 3 years. We have a real problem of non-compliance because we've identified over PCA in 2025 that we have 55% compliance. So a number of measures with the end of the duty-free, what we call duty-free advantage. We will have already adopted the legislation to put an end to the 150 euros of duty relief. We will, as from the 1st of July, so in 3 weeks, have a 3 euro per item on the imported goods in small parcels in distant sales. We have created the notion of importable distant sales, and all the rest I have already more or less explained, so I think I can move on. So e-commerce, we have eliminated the competitive advantages of e-commerce, which were specific for e-commerce, with the no customs duty relief anymore as from 1st of July. And we will have an economic operator established in the EU who will be responsible for the financial and non-financial liability of it. And this economic operator will not be the consumer. Today, if we import goods in the EU, the person who is responsible is the consumer. Tomorrow, it will be the importer for distant sales. And the importer for distant sales will be either the platform that facilitates the distant sales, or it will be the supplier of the goods, and it will be left to the choice of these two entities or two persons. The customs authority will not in no way decide who will be the importer for distant sales. Other elements that I would like to say is that we will have a union as no later than customs warehouses for distant sales. And the co-legislators have decided to have specific penalties for operators in distant sales. I will explain that a little bit more later on. Let's move on. Voila, so you have now a specific slide on the deletion of the exemption. So due to the emergency of the situation, it has been adopted already at the end of last year. And it will be applicable in 3 weeks' time. We have really anticipated this entry into application, and that will be a fixed rate of €3 duty for goods sold in distant sales between the 1st of July 2026 and the 1st of July 2028. The reason why we have a fixed rate is that we do not have yet a data hub. The data hub will be there only in 2 years' time, and therefore it was not possible to have a real, let's say, classification rate, except for specific goods, especially except for preferential arrangements where it is possible. But the €3 will be based on an H7 declaration, not on an H1. The IT systems today do not allow to have all goods contemplated in an H1, and therefore that's the reason why we have a €3 per item until the data hub is there. We can move on. This is the timeline for e-commerce. I think I already said it, so I will not spend too much time on it. The importer for distant sales, as I said, it's a choice between the seller and the platform. And all obligations related to the importer apply to the importer for distant sales. So it's exactly the same regime as for the importer that I described before. Handling fee. The handling fee is not a tax, it is a fee, and it is to cover customs authorities' costs for e-commerce import. It will be also applicable by item, and it will apply for handling requests for placing goods under release for free circulation. It will have to be paid at the same time as the customs debt, and in case there is the consumer changes its mind and decides to not order anymore, this will not be refundable by the importer for distant sales. It will be non-discriminatory, and it will be approximate to the cost of the services rendered. So we will later on in the course of the year identify the amount in a secondary legislation, and there will be a lower amount for goods which would be placed in a customs warehouse for distant sales. We can move on. Okay, customs cooperation. Customs cooperation, we have a specific title on this. We have specific provisions for cooperation within the Union. It's not interesting for you, but we have also specific provisions for customs cooperation outside the Union. And for this, I would like just to focus on one provision, which is exchange of data with third country. For the first time, we have a provision on this, where Commission, ELUCA, and Customs Authority can exchange data with third countries' authorities. And it will happen in the case we have an EU international agreement. It is provided for by law, or we have a bilateral agreement which is concluded by a member state when it is authorized by the Commission. So this is quite good now to have such a provision because rules are clear and we know also, and the Commission will have also the possibility to examine the existing bilateral agreements that member states have concluded with third countries. Let's move on. A very quick word on infringements and penalties, where I just would like to say that for the very first time also, we have finally a framework for infringements and penalties. We have a non-exhaustive list of customs infringements. We have a list of penalties which can be applied, especially fines, withdrawal of authorization, confiscation of goods, and we have especially a penalty for systematic non-compliance in e-commerce in distance sales. And in such a case, after I will not go through the detailed provision because it's quite long and complex, but in case there is a systematic non-compliance and there is a repetition over time, the fine will be quite high because it can arrive up to 6% of the turnover of the sales which were conducted in the 12 months which preceded the constatation of the infringement. And in the end, if it's serious enough, it can even lead to forbidding the distance sale to propose goods on a website. So it can even lead to the closure, the temporary closure of a website. So it's quite a deterrent, it has a deterrent effect because it's the sole infringement for which we have very clear penalties with amounts which have been provided for. For the others, we don't have specific amounts of penalties. We have the list, but not specific amounts. The Commission will have the possibility to reopen this part in some years, in 6 years after entry into application. Anyway, the Commission has always the right to propose to reopen the text, but it is now spelled out into the legislation itself, so it has a political announcement. We can move on. So let's product safety enforcement. Your symposium is about product safety. So just to say that now we have at the border the customs reform, but we will have also on the market, we will have very soon at EU level a proposal for a European Product Act, which is expected still this year and would modernize the new legislative framework and market surveillance rules, and it would reinforce the digital product passport. So all that will continue to rely on what we have already constructed with customs. It will be completed in the future with this European Product Act. And with that, we should have a very good and big arsenal to really much better control what is entering into the EU territory, because our objective is to have a level playing field with our producers. It's to have to facilitate the trade of our legitimate international traders, and it is to have to protect our consumers, our citizens. With that, I'm going to stop because I know I'm arriving to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Biz de Sayın Perolat'a çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Thank you, Ms. Perolat. Değerli katılımcılar, Uluslararası Sempozyumumuzun ilk gün programının son bölümüne gelmiş bulunmaktayız. Günün sonunda oturumlarda öne çıkan değerlendirmeleri bütüncül bir çerçevede ele almak üzere Ticaret Bakanlığı Ürün Güvenliği ve Denetimi Genel Müdürlüğü Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Sayın Umut Gök'ü sahneye davet ediyorum. Buyurun Sayın Genel Müdür.
Değerli hanımefendiler, beyefendiler, Uluslararası Sempozyumumuzun ilk gününün kapanış konuşmasını yapmak üzere sizlerin karşısındayım. Böyle verimli bir sempozyumun kapanış konuşmasını yapmanın kolay ve zor tarafları var. Kolay tarafı bugün değerli katılımcılarımız söylenmesi gereken tüm mesajları verdi. Zor tarafı ise o kadar değerli mesajlar ve verildi, o kadar güzel saptamalar yapıldı ki bunların hepsini de toparlayıp toparlayamayacağımdan emin değilim. Ben de internetten sık sık alışveriş yapan biri olarak bir tüketici riski yaşıyorum. Bugün katılımcılarımızın hiçbiri bu riskten bahsetmedi. Aldığım ürünlerin bir kısmını eşim çok da kullanmayacağımı ya da o kadar gerekli olmadığını düşünüyor. Benim bir tüketici olarak yaşadığım risk, bunları eşime fark ettirmeden eve sokabilmek. Ama bu konuda da eminim yalnız değilim. Binlerce dünyada veya milyonlarca tüketici benzer riskler, sağlık riski yani fiziksel olmasa da zihinsel, mental risk yaşıyor olabilir. Bu konuda bildiğim kadarıyla Avrupa Birliği'nin henüz bir düzenlemesi yok. Ela Hanım bu bir mesaj değil ama yanlış anlamayın. Ela Hanım'ın gözleri parladı düzenleme deyince delegasyondan. Bugün Genel Müdürüm de sabah belirtmişti. Biz Ticaret Bakanlığı Ürün Güvenliği ve Denetimi Genel Müdürlüğü olarak yaklaşık 30 yıldır Avrupa Birliği'nin ürün güvenliği sistemini sektörel ve yatay mevzuat uyumu yaparak, bunları hayata geçirerek ya geçirilmesine katkı sağlayarak ve bunları güncelleyerek yoğun bir faaliyet içerisindeyiz. Açıkçası hem içinde bulunduğumuz dünyadaki hızlı değişimler, teknolojik olsun, ekonomik olsun, hem de Avrupa Birliği mevzuatlarının da buna cevap verecek şekilde hızlıca yenilenmesi bu anlamda işimizi de oldukça yoğun kılmaya devam edecek. Yani işimiz Türkiye'de ürün güvenliği sistemiyle uğraşan insanlar olarak, buna diğer bakanlıklardaki arkadaşlarımız kalite altyapısının tüm unsurlarını dahil edebilirim. Yani düne göre daha fazla işimiz var ama yarına göre de daha az işimiz var. Yarın daha fazlasını yapmak zorunda kalacağız. Bu süre içerisinde Türkiye mevzuat uyumundan uygunluk değerlendirmesine, C işaretlemesinden akreditasyona, uygunluk değerlendirmesine kadar bu yeni yasama çerçevesi dediğimiz AB'nin sistemini, tüm unsurlarını birebir almış durumda. Bugünse burada tartıştığımız konu bu son dönem, son yıllarda hız kazanan dijitalleşme, e-ticaret, döngüsellik konularının bu yeni ürün güvenliği sisteminde nasıl etkilediği üzerine konuşmalar dinledik. Bugün hakikaten farklı bir dönem içerisindeyiz. Geçmişte ürünler fiziksel olarak satılırken, denetimler klasik market ortamlarında, tüketiciyle buluşma yerlerinde yapılırken, bugünse içinde bulunduğumuz dijitalleşme, döngüsellik, e-ticaret, bunları farklı şekilde ele almamızı zorunlu kılıyor. Yani e-ticaret hem iktisadi işletmeciler açısından hem tüketiciler açısından çok büyük nimetlere sahip. Bir kere ürün çeşitliliği ve ürünlerin daha ucuza temin edilebilmesi bunların başında geliyor. Ama bunların da bir takım yeni riskler ortaya koyduğunu gözden kaçırmamamız lazım. Az önce rakamlarda paylaşıldı. Bugün Avrupa Birliği'nde günlük yaklaşık 16 milyon paketin AB'ye ithalatı söz konusu. Yıllık ithalat miktarı 6 milyara ulaşmış durumda 2025 yılı içerisinde. Keza yine Türkiye'mizin 2025 yılı verilerine göre toplam e-ticaret hacmi 4,5 trilyon TL'yi geçmiş durumda. Bizim de yine tüm Türkiye'deki işlem sayımız 6 milyarın üzerinde. Bu rakamların ortaya koyduğu sonuç bizim de artık bu ürün güvenliği sistemine başından sonuna yeni bir gözle bakmamız gerektiği. İşte o yüzden biz de bu uluslararası sempozyumun ilk gününü dijitalleşmenin ürün güvenliği sistemine olası etkileri üzerine ayırdık. Sabah gerçekleştirilen ilk oturumda OECD'den Sayın Jan Çeke bize yeni sistemde dijital platformların ve uluslararası işbirliğinin güvenli ürünlerin piyasaya arz edilmesinde ne kadar önemli olduğunu ortaya koydu. Artık ürün güvenliği öyle bir boyuta ulaşmış durumda ki tek bir ülkenin ya da tek bir bölgenin kendi başına inisiyatif alarak harekete geçmesi yeterli olmayacak. Burada dijital platformların da daha fazla sorumluluk alarak ya da onlara yeni sorumluluklar verilerek ülkelerle işbirliği içinde çalışması şart. Aksi takdirde tek tek ülkelerin kendi başlarına ithalatta paket kontrolü yaparak ürün güvenliğini tam anlamıyla sağlamaları mümkün gözükmüyor. Sonrasında gerçekleştirilen ilk panelde dijital ürün güvenliği mevzuatının yatay çerçevesini ele aldık. Burada Avrupa Birliği'nin yeni yasama çerçevesi, Genel ürün güvenliği tüzüğü, dijital hizmetler yasası, Gümrük Reformu gibi sektörel mevzuatlardaki dönüşümün ürün güvenliği sistemini nasıl etkileyeceği değerli panelistlerce tartışıldı. Bu tartışmalar bize şunu gösteriyor. Sadece ürünün dönüşümü değil, aynı zamanda ürün güvenliği kavramının da bir dönüşümü söz konusu. Az önce de bahsettiğim gibi daha önce bir ürünün mekaniksel, kimyasal ya da elektriksel risklerine bakmak yeterliydi. Bugünse artık içinde bulunduğumuz dijitalleşme çağında o ürünün içerdiği yazılımsal kodlar, aldığı güncellemeler, bağlantı hizmetleri, tüketiciye sunulduğu platformun ortamı, bunlar hepsi ürün güvenliği kavramını etkileyen, değiştiren unsurlar. Ürün güvenliği de sadece markette, rafta ürünün tüketiciye arz edildiği anıyla değil, ürünün kullanım süresi boyunca aldığı yeni güncellemelerle beraber tüm hayat döngüsünü içermekte. Bu konuda çok güncel örnekler de zaman zaman medyaya yansıyor. Özellikle bu elektrikli araçların otomasyon uygulamaları kapsamında tüketiciler için gerçekten bir taraftan müthiş imkanlar sağlarken diğer taraftan da ürün güvenliği boyutunun, ürün sizin elinizde, yani bir araba örneğinde arabayı kullanırken bile yapılan, sizin belki bilginiz dahilinde olmayan yapılan güncellemelerle kullandığınız aracın güvenliğini etkilemesi söz konusu. Daha sonra öğleden sonraki forumda bu sefer mevzuatın dışında mevzuat uygulayıcılarının sözlerini dinledik. Burada PGD kuruluşları, ithalat denetimi birimleri, akreditasyon ve uygunluk değerlendirmesi konusunda çalışan değerli katılımcılar kendilerinin bu yeni sistemden, dijitalleşmeden nasıl etkilendiğini ortaya koydular. Hepsinin de verdiği örneklerden anlıyoruz ki artık eski şekilde iş yaparak, mevcut alışkanlıkları devam ettirerek yeni çağın gereklerine uygun hareket etmek çok mümkün olmayacak. Burada hepsinin kendi iş süreçlerini elden geçirerek yeni işbirliği modelleri ortaya koyması, başta yapay zeka olmak üzere teknolojinin imkanlarından faydalanmaları artık şart. Daha sonra forum sonrasında Genel Müdürlüğümüzün faydalanıcısı olduğu Avrupa Birliği mali desteğiyle devam eden e-ticarette ürün güvenliği için teknik destek projesi hakkında bilgi aldık. Bu 1,5 yıl önce başlamış bir proje ve bu proje kapsamında önce bir durum analizi ve ihtiyaç analizi yapıldı. Eylemler ve strateji planları ortaya kondu. Devamında şu an bizim ürün güvenliğine ilişkin mevcut mevzuat taslaklarımız elden geçirildi ve henüz yayımlanmasa da bunların güncel taslak haline getirildiler. Avrupa Birliği mevzuatıyla birebir uyumlu şekilde. Ve son olarak da bir EPGD yazılımı kuruldu. Bu EPGD yazılımı sadece bir yazılım olarak düşünmeyin. Zaten çok da güzel detaylı bir sunum yapıldı. Bu artık günümüzde her gün binlerce, on binlerce paketin yurt dışından geldiği ya da yurt içinde döndüğü bir sistemde mevcut klasik PGD denetimiyle artık yetişilemeyeceği ortada ve burada da bizim kamu olarak yapay zekadan, risk analizinden maksimum ölçüde faydalanmamız gerekiyor. Sistem kendi algoritmalarıyla riskli olduğunu düşündüğü ürünleri en azından bir süzgeçten geçirerek ilgili denetim birimlerine yönlendirecek ve bu şekilde denetimin daha verimli, kısıtlı kaynakların daha etkin kullanılması sağlanacak. Ama burada da şunu vurgulamak isterim. Bu sadece kamunun kendi başına yapabileceği bir iş değil. Daha doğrusu sadece kamu kaynaklarıyla yapılması halinde istenilen sonucun alınması çok mümkün gözükmüyor. Burada çevrim içi platformlarla, uygunluk değerlendirmesi kuruluşlarıyla ve tüketici dernekleriyle de yakın bir işbirliği içinde çalışılması şart. Günün son oturumunda ise Avrupa Komisyonu'ndan Vergilendirme ve Gümrük Birliği Genel Müdürü Yardımcısı Sayın Michèle Perolat bize AB'nin yeni gümrük reformu hakkında çok kapsamlı bir sunum yaptı. Yeni kurulması planlanan Gümrük Otoritesi, Avrupa Birliği Veri Merkezi ve yeni sistemde yine çevrim içi platformların sorumlulukları hakkında bilgi verdi. Açıkçası bu sistem ülkemizi de mutlaka etkileyecek. Bizim bunun dışında kalmamız veya buna paralel olmayan uygulamalar yapmamız söz konusu olamaz Gümrük Birliği sebebiyle. Ve şu ortaya çıktı ki yeni dönemde ürün güvenliği sisteminde PGD otoriteleri, ithalat denetim birimleri yani gümrük otoriteleri, çevrim içi platformlar arasında ve bunların arasındaki veri tabanlarının etkin bir şekilde işleyerek iyi bir işbirliği kurulmaması halinde yine sistemin çok verimli olması mümkün değil. Değerli misafirler, yani bugünkü konuşmalardan ortaya çıkan sonuç şu bariz: ürün güvenliği artık bir mevzuat olmaktan çıkmış durumda. Yani sadece bir mevzuat değil, bu mevzuatın dışında dijitalleşme, döngüsellik, veri tabanları, yapay zeka, siber dayanıklılık gibi pek çok konuda beraber ele alınması gereken bir konu. Biz de Avrupa Birliği'nin ile paralel şekilde kendi mevzuatımızı ve akabinde kalite altyapımızı buna uygun hale getirmekle mükellefiz. Önümüzdeki dönemde de sık sık yine bu yeni yasama çerçevesi revizyonu, dijital hizmetler yasasının ürün güvenliğine uygulanması, dijital ürün pasaportu, döngüsellik gibi konuları bol bol konuşmaya devam edeceğiz gözüküyor. Kısaca yarın hakkında da bilgi vermek istiyorum. Yarın da bir ürünün tanınmasını, kamu kurumları açısından izlenebilirliğini sağlamak için elimizdeki önemli bir araç olan dijital ürün pasaportu hakkında yine verimli oturumlar yapılacaktır. Bu oturumlara hem Avrupa Komisyonu'ndan, Avrupa Standartizasyon Kuruluşu Senelek'ten, ülkemizde dijital pasaport üzerinde çalışan kamu kurumları, akademisyenler, özel sektörden değerli temsilcilerle dijital ürün pasaportunun hukuki altyapısını ve mimarisini, ülkemizdeki mevcut pilot uygulamalarını ve yine dijital ürün pasaportunun önümüzdeki süreçte ülkemiz için arz ettiği fırsatları ve zorlukları ele alacağız. Ben sözlerime son verirken bugün bilgi ve tecrübelerini bizimle paylaşan tüm değerli katılımcılarımıza ve sizlere teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Bu sempozyumun gerçekleşmesinde emeği geçen tüm herkese, teknik ekibe ve genel müdürlüğümden de özellikle kalite altyapısı ve PGD dairesiyle daire başkanım Göksu Hanım'a teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Yarın yeniden bir araya gelmek dileğimle saygılarımı sunuyorum.
Efendim biz de Sayın Genel Müdür Yardımcımıza çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Böylelikle sempozyumumuzun ilk gününün tüm oturumlarını bitirmiş olduk. Şimdi sizleri fuaye alanında resepsiyona ve sonrasında da gala yemeğine davet ediyorum. Sempozyumumuzun ikinci gününde yani yarın saat 10'da görüşmek dileğiyle iyi akşamlar.